Today's philosopher is St. Augustine of Hippo, AD 354. So this is after the death of Jesus. So, St. Augustine of Hippo is a North African-born religious philosopher during the medieval period. Now, he's one of the most important people in the development of different tenets of Christianity. We're not going to talk about anything related to religion so much, but some famous things you may have heard of, like original sin, city of God versus city of man. These were themes and concepts that he introduced, but we're going to talk about two concepts of his that he's discussed, which do not have anything to do with religion. What is time? If no one asks me, I know, but if I wanted to explain it to one who asks me, I plainly do not know. It's really interesting when I ask a kid, what is time, to hear somebody try to explain it. What is time? Time is a measure in which events can be ordered from the past through the present into the future, and also the measure of durations of events and the intervals between them. So that's a definition. It's a measure. It's a ruler by which we know. If you say, let's get together tomorrow at 3:30, I know what that means. But is it real if we don't believe in it? So here's the time zones, which shows how basically randomly arbitrary it is. We've come up with a calendar, 365 days, 24 hours, 60 minutes, 60 seconds. But just the nature of, flying from one time zone to another, it's different times from when you land, from when you take off. And then some states don't even use time zones. Like, for instance, Arizona does not do the whole switch. So if you get used to being pitch black in the morning when you drive into school, and then all of a sudden we set the clocks back or set them forward, however it works, time is kind of random and arbitrary, isn't it? So what Augustine had to say, he says, on Earth, it's really hard to define it. We talk about past, present, and future, and we know that was in the past, that's going to be in the future, this is the present. Those words have meaning to us. However, and here's the deep concept, the past and the future do not exist. They will never exist. They are just concepts that we use for organization purposes in our mind. All that we ever have is the present moment. Now, we could say the past, and that's maybe short for a past present moment, but ultimately, past and future only exist in our mind as a concept, as past and future present moments. Now, this might seem kind of arbitrary and pointless, but when you really think about where the past exists, it's not anywhere that we can go to. Augustine says there's useful being able to say past, present, future. We understand that. It's a concept that we're taught. But if time really doesn't truly exist, even though it's useful in terms of measurement, all that really will ever exist is an infinitely long present moment. I had a kid write just the other day that they feel like the present moment is never here because once it comes, it's gone. Well, once it comes, it's gone, and once it comes, it's gone, and it becomes the future, or it becomes the past, but it doesn't. All we have is one present moment. We have consciousness of an awareness of this moment right now. When we look out with our senses and feel with our senses and smell, we are experiencing the present moment. The only place that we can go to the past is in our minds. So we measure time within our own memory. Past and the future only exist in our minds. When they get here, they are the present. Now here's a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, a Eastern philosopher. The present moment is the only moment ever available to us, and it's the door to all moments. In other words, if you want to prepare for the future, you'll do it in the present moment. And when that quote-unquote future gets here, it will also be the present moment. Therefore, time is not really a feature of the world. It's something we've all agreed upon as a way to organize ourselves, as a measure, but it only exists in our minds. The past, only in your memories, and the future only in your imagination. Now, I've said this in previous classes, but the nature of us, we have a frontal cortex. The frontal lobe is about 40% of our brain, and that's our capacity to use creativity. And we think, when you think about it, your imagination is what you're using when you're thinking of the future. You're taking all of the events that have happened to you up till now, and you're picturing in an imaginary way what might happen in the future. It's interesting to see how many of us think of a worst case scenario. And also in regards to memories, we tend to forget a lot of the good memories, but the memories tied to the most emotion, they tend to get kind of hardwired into our brain. And unfortunately, we have a lot of negative emotions based on how we live. So when we bring up those negative memories, each time we bring them up, they've actually shown that we sometimes increase the amount of negativity to them. In other words, we're misremembering it being even worse than it is. So the general concept to take is, all we have is the present moment. That's the real world, the real movie playing 24/7 live right in front of us. Or we can go into our mind. We can picture a quote-unquote future, or we can remember a quote-unquote past, and in doing so, we're missing the only moment we'll ever have. Your body is present, is your mind? And that's the question. Usually we're full of all of the mindful emotions, not mindful in the mindfulness way, but mind is full of lots of stories of the past and fears of the future. So one of the concepts that Augustine did bring up is, why is there evil in the world? And terrible things happen every day to people who do not deserve it. Not to say anybody deserves evil, but his argument was, humans are thinking rational beings. We have the ability to think, probably much more so than any other animal. In order to be rational, in order to have thinking, we have to have free will. We have to have the ability to choose right or left, A or B, whatever it might be. So being that we have a choice, we also, unfortunately, that choice includes good or evil. Some people can use their time productively. Other people could use their time in a very negative, evil way. We can choose to act bad or well, and that's the point. Evil exists because we have free will, and some people abuse it. So now we're going to go on to discuss the concept of free will. I don't remember predetermining that. Predetermination is a concept by which maybe things are planned out in some way. Maybe one thing causes another. Now, this concept, hypothetically, of someone, a godlike person looking down and saying that maybe we have free will completely, and every choice we make is our own. Free will versus determinism. Free will representing the mind with the gears moving as we make choices. Determinism, the concept that maybe our choices that we think are being freely made are actually being controlled by other forces beyond our awareness. So the idea of free will. Augustine said, we have free will to choose whether or not we want to get with the program of life, and because of our actions, evil is going to ultimately be an option, and some people go that way. Augustine said, if you look at life in the right way, if you push away your desires that might so you really are attracted to someone who doesn't want to be with you, and then a rape occurs. That's someone fulfilling their desires in a quite evil, terrible way. He said our choice is either to follow our desires wherever they might go, even into bad places, or he saw life as sometimes an unpleasant moral test. In other words, doing the right thing isn't always fun. Being the right sort of person isn't always exciting. And he felt that if you achieve goodness and virtue in this world as a result of your actions, that there would be a future world. We're not going to get into the whole religious implication, but rather more discovery into free will. So what causes us to behave the way we do? Do we have choice? Are we influenced by others? Are we taught certain things? Free will says you control your behavior. In any situation, you have the choice. You could act differently. You could think back of a time in the past when you made one choice, and that choice maybe changed everything. And if we have free will, that means we have to be responsible for our actions. Therefore, our behavior is not predictable. We're going to make a choice every given moment. Just because my dad is a bank robber doesn't mean I'm going to be a bank robber. I have free will. But here's the question. A lot of people will say, well, I wanted to go to Taco Bell. That's why I went there. Or I wanted to become a biologist. That's why I did that. But what if, quote unquote, what you want is not really under your control? Like when the thoughts come into your mind, when you use logical reasons to make the choices that you make, what if the things that you desire are beyond you? They just, in my case, they kind of come to me. I'm in the mood for Taco Bell. Well, why am I in the mood for Taco Bell? That's a terrible example, so we'll just move on. Have a seat, Kermit. What I'm about to tell you might come as a big shock. And obviously you've got Kermit the Frog, and he sees the X-ray of somebody's hand up his buttocks, controlling him that he's but a puppet. Now, I don't think free will and predeterminism says that we're simply puppets, but potentially the choices we make, are they controlled by things above our awareness? It seems obvious you have free will. You're going to choose to do what you want to do. Maybe you go to the movie, maybe you go to the mall, maybe you go out to eat. You can do anything you want to do, but a lot of philosophers say that this free will is not real. It's something that we've imagined, that we have a choice to do what we want to do, and we're going to make the choice that we want. But they say, instead of a free choice, these choices are caused or determined by previous events. You may have heard of the butterfly effect, that a butterfly flaps its wings and it causes something to happen in the other part of the world. That's a bit stretched, but maybe the reason I chose what I chose is a series of events going back to when I was 3 and something happened to me that made my mind a certain way so that I have the feeling or the opinion in this moment to act the way I act, instead of potentially differently. Do we have free will, or do the mass media and our culture control us, our desires and actions from the moment we're born? Kids will argue with me every year that they like wearing ripped jeans, they love the style, and they like purple shirts that say pink. I'm not saying anything bad about either of those things necessarily, but the reason we like those, is it our own choice, or have we been conditioned / brainwashed by what we've seen, what we've experienced? That's the question. So philosophers say there's 4 possible theories for why we make the choices we make, and the first, of course, is free will. Free will, your actions are not determined by anything prior to decision. And I think most people feel they have this. I'm going to choose today what I want. But maybe philosophers think there's other factors. Second theory has to do with something called hard determinism. Hard determinism is the opposite of free will. It says the future is determined by past actions. The future hasn't been written, but just like a series of dominoes, past events are going to have a series of cause and effects, which will actually make you make the choices you, quote unquote, freely make. The choice you made was actually made long, long ago, you just didn't know it. Hard determinists believe that all of these social forces outside our control shape everything we do. So, if the cause and effect, the butterfly flaps its wings and something happens, that means there's nothing random in the universe, that instead life is kind of going according to some sort of track. And there's the domino concept. Sorry about that. So, child grows up to become an aggressive criminal because as a kid he learned from his criminal father. If you're the youngest of 16 and of those 16 kids they're all bank robbers, the chances of you becoming a bank robber are probably high. And in fact, you'll probably want to be a bank robber. You'll have a free will choice to become a bank robber. But did you? Or was there really no other choice? The illusion of free choice. No matter what we choose, maybe it ends up in the same place. Maybe everything is a series of dominoes. My DNA made me do it. This, most people would say, is a cop-out. But can you understand? I mean, the worst example I can think of, the worst human I can think of would be Hitler. And then you realize that Hitler, as a young boy, got beaten so badly by his father, cracked his skull, left him in the hospital. Not excusing anything Hitler did, but can you understand why he is the way he is? But then you're saying, well, that gives him somehow a pass. He had free will to try to take over the world, and free will for what the thing he did to all the millions of innocent people. That's a cop-out to most. The fact is, we are influenced by lots of things. Our thoughts, beliefs, and actions, that's a head, by the way, peeled open. All of the thoughts, beliefs that lead to our actions are influenced by things like the group we're in, influenced by our education and our family upbringing. You have to admit there is some degree of influence of outside forces in what we end up thinking. Classical conditioning, you may have heard of Pavlov's dog. This is Pavlov. Pavlov basically has a concept that he said, we are conditioned from birth to behave in a certain way. For instance, if there's no problem with you eating cow, you're used to eating cow, you had hamburger your whole life. If I start talking about eating horse or eating dog, you're going to be repulsed by that because it's not something that you're used to, that you've been conditioned to realize is acceptable. Even deeper than this is classical conditioning. He says that our behavior is pre-programmed. He was studying saliva in dogs, and he was basically wanting to see the amount of saliva they generated, and he had the dogs in the cage, and he would ring a little bell, and when the bell was rang, that meant the food was there. So it was a response. All he had to do was signal that the food was coming by ringing the bell, and the dogs, after a while, realized, oh, it's dinner time, and they would start salivating just because the bell was rang. They made a connection that bell ringing means food, means I salivate. And after a while, we get conditioned to expect certain things or make certain choices based on the brainwashing or the predeterminism that might occur in our previous experiences. So this is, for some people, they think it's a bunch of garbage. What do you think of determinism? Did you choose to be like you are and make the choices you've made? Everybody would say, I freely made a decision to make that choice. But did you really? Or are you sort of just working with what you've got, meaning the way you think? Your opinions come from the way you think. But why do you think the way you think? Was that perhaps programmed? Are you only a result of all of the external influences you've had? This is kind of a nature-nurtured thing. Everybody would agree, I think, that nature, meaning how you naturally are, has a role. But the nurturing or the upbringing does it, in fact, change how we think? A third theory, because most people hate the idea of hard determinism. Most people hate the idea that you have no control, and that's why we have soft determinism. Soft determinism says human behavior is determined by prior events. Your thinking is caused by prior events. Your opinions are caused by prior events. But in the final moment, you still have free will. Your dad and all 17 of your siblings can be a bank robber, and you can be there that day with the mask and the gun, and in the last minute, you can decide to leave. You still have a choice. Even though your likely choices and thoughts and opinions and actions have been determined, you still have a choice. So the idea of soft determinism combines the two. It's got some free will, it's got some determinism. Yeah, we're influenced by our genetics. I bet as you get older, you'll start to see how you're becoming your parents. Also, obviously, our influences that if we have a good friend group or a bad friend group, that's going to change our opinions and choices. But you still have free choice. That's why most people end up falling on this. In the beginning, most people say, free will. And then after you begin to think, is the way I think, was it determined by other forces than my personal choice? Free will combined with determinism gives us soft determinism, but you cannot choose to what you wish for. In other words, you can't choose what you think. You think a certain way. But ultimately, these wants, even if they're determined by other forces, you still have a say. And this allows responsibility for our actions. Am I the captain of my ship, meaning free will, or am I sailing on a ship controlled by some unknown autopilot? That autopilot being the series of dominoes that led up to this very moment in your life. So just to review, determinism, past leads to future. Free will, past is going to lead to options that you can take. And I would say soft determinism would also be on the right side of that little chart. I like doing this in class. Obviously, we can't really do it here. But give an example of a free action that you performed and explain why you think it wasn't determined. I said this to a kid a few years ago, and he jumped up and he clicked his heels and he said, there's no way in the world anybody could have predicted I did that. I did that of my own free will. And I said, that's true, but at the same time, you're the youngest of three, and you need to, you're kind of the wise ass of the family. I love this kid, by the way. And you always want to prove people wrong. So the nature of your personality, based on everything that happened to you, means given an argument by an annoying teacher that you have no free will, you were destined to do something weird like click your heels. And when I said it to him, there's a little sparkle in his eye that he understood he understood the concept. The final concept of possible choices, based on the choices we come up with, is fatalism. This is a little bit different from the fate concept of the Stoics. Stoics say that fate is what happens to you. Fatalism is a lot more than that. Fatalism is the belief that basically the future is pre-planned. It's your fate that this is going to happen, that there's a plan for each and every one of us, and you have no choice at all. And in fact, it's not even determinism. There's already a map for the history of humanity, and it's on there. A lot of people really hate this idea, because if you have no choice, isn't that depressing? That, like, history is mapped out for you? But in the past years, when I've talked about it with kids, I've got some kids who say, I almost wish that fate was there, because that means if there's fatalism, if there's a path already carved out that you don't know about into your future, does that take the pressure off of you for all of the choices you make? So much anxiety we have comes from our choices, thinking that there's a right choice and a wrong choice. And the idea of fatalism says your choices don't matter. But we know probably that it's definitely one of the three. I mean, fatalism could be accurate, but I think people need to know they have choice in their own lives. Responsibility plays a big role in this concept. If free will doesn't exist, how can you blame me for my behavior? I couldn't help it, all 17 siblings were bank robbers. Hard determinists say your action, if it's caused by previous events, means you can't be responsible for your actions. So it's never really argued this way, but it's unfortunately shown that somebody who was sexually molested as a child has a higher likelihood to be a sexual predator as an adult than the normal person. Does that event that happened tragically to their childhood cause the event in the future, or is there free will? And I'm pretty sure there's free will, because as many people who do bad things because of a bad past, there are other people who do bad things despite a good past. And there's people who do good things despite a bad past. There seems to be some choice. But if all the choices we make are really out of our control, how could we be held accountable for our crimes? That's a little bit scary, and that's why hard determinism kind of gets a hard pass from me, at least. Soft determinism says you have choice, and with that choice, you still have responsibility. And we'll leave with this quote, one of my favorite quotes in this content. Life is like a game of cards. The hand that is dealt to you represents determinism. The way you play it is free will. So earlier in the year, we were talking about in regards to fate with the Stoics. And fate is what just happened. The milk has spilled. Most people cry over it. That's free will. You can cry over the milk being spilled. Or you could do something more productive with your emotions. The idea of, in poker, sometimes you get really good cards and sometimes you get crap. If you get good cards, you can win the hand. But if you get dealt crappy cards, you can still win the hand. Use bluffing, etc., etc. And so the idea I hope everybody leaves with is that you do have some degree of free will in your choices. But for tonight's journal, write about your views in regards to Augustine about time and about free will versus determinism. We will be watching a film probably tomorrow called The Adjustment Bureau, which will further illustrate this concept. Have a great day.